Hey guys, my name is Nick, and I'm so glad that you've decided to journey with us through Alpha together. Alpha is a course that millions of people have taken around the world, thousands of them here at Lutheran Church of Hope, and I'm so excited that you are going to be one of those. So here's the thing, I know that for a lot of you, it takes a lot of bravery to even just start something like this. And so let me just take a little bit of the pressure off. I want you to know that this is a space where you can ask anything, that you can question everything, and in fact, we really want to encourage that. This time is not a time where you just get to sit and listen to me or whoever talk at you and tell you what you're supposed to believe. Really, we're just trying to start a conversation about what is it that you really believe. There's so little time in our life to actually ask these big questions that matter so much and determine so much about how we live life on this earth. So we're gonna do a talk each week to kind of launch into a topic and a really big question that's important for life. But starting this upcoming week, we're actually gonna be talking about these things and discussing them in groups, and everyone's gonna have a chance to ask their questions and to share their feelings and to contribute. And so I'm excited for you to do that. So we're gonna be speaking from a Christian perspective, and I know for some of you, you might be thinking, wow, he just said Christian, so am I gonna be the only person here that doesn't believe all this stuff? Am I gonna be the only person that's not a Christian? First of all, you're not gonna be the only person, and second of all, Alpha is actually designed for someone that has big questions. And so whether you're, you've been a Christian your whole life and you grew up in the faith, or whether you're really just asking big questions, so many people that are in the exact same position that you are have found Alpha to be so helpful and actually really fun. And so I want to invite you, even though that we're speaking from a Christian perspective, be real, question everything, and it's going to be a fun journey. Truth be told, when I was growing up, I actually had a lot of reasons that faith didn't sit super well with me. And so for Christianity, as I was growing up, it wasn't really like what Christians believed so much, but when I was younger, it was church. It just seemed boring. I remember on Sunday mornings, my parents would say, put on these fancy clothes. And I didn't like wearing fancy clothes as a kid. I wanted to wear comfortable clothes. And we'd go and we'd sing these songs that I didn't know, and they just seemed so boring. And I remember that the pastors, which is funny because now I'm a pastor, but I remember that the pastors were they were just boring. And so I didn't want to spend my time doing that. And not only that, when I got a little older, even though I grew up in church and there were so many things that I knew about faith just from being in church, I started to wonder, well, is this really true? Because there's a lot of different religions and they all believe slightly different things or very different things. Or is this just something that people kind of use to make themselves feel better about tough things like death or evil in the world or whatever else it might be? And so when I was in college especially, I really started to look into, is it even true? Because Christianity claims some pretty crazy things. But I think throughout all of it, at first I was like, maybe it's just too boring for me. And then it was like, is it even true? But throughout all of it, I was wondering, does this actually make any difference in my life? Because I don't really want to spend time devoting myself to a guy from a couple thousand years ago if it's not actually going to make my life any better. Because I would look at other Christians, and instead of actually knowing what the Christian faith says, I would look at them and I would say, okay, do I want to be like them or do I not want to be like them? And so I would start to judge all of Christianity, which this is kind of arrogant of me when I was younger, to judge all of Christianity based on how one person might have been acting. So if they're hypocritical, well, I don't want to be hypocritical, and so I don't want to be a Christian. And so for me, it was kind of wrestling through those three things. Church seems boring, and is it even true? And is this even relevant for my life today? And at the same time, I had this nagging feeling, and maybe you've experienced it too, where I just felt like there had to be more to life than this. I heard someone say one time, we have this bucket in our hearts, okay? And it's like we're always trying to fill it up and keep it full. And so I don't know what it is for you, what makes you happy in life. We all have different things. But whatever it is that you're putting in your happiness bucket to make you full, the question is, does it stay full? And so I remember when I was in high school, I thought, okay, if I could just fill my happiness bucket up with a girlfriend, that was like the main thing. I was figure out how to get a girlfriend, a pretty girl to like me. And guitar. I wanted just as much guitar as possible. And I knew, you know, like everybody knows, well, getting rich, that sounds awesome, and I'd love to have a lot of money, but I know that's not gonna like make me totally happy. We all know that, but I still pursued that. And I still wanted that. I wanted to be like a famous rock star, okay, and make a ton of money and live this comfortable life. And at the same time, I also wanted to make sure that I didn't have that basic life. You know what I'm talking about? The one where you work really hard in school so you can get good grades, so that you can go to a good college, so that you can get a good job, so that you can make enough money, so that you can buy fancy things and never have to worry about stuff, apparently. And then after that, maybe you'll get a pretty spouse, and then you have enough money so you can get a really awesome house, and then you can have this perfect family, right? And once we have all of that, well, then we get sick and die in a hospital, right? And that's just like morbid, but that's kind of the basic life. I forgot golf. You have to golf in like Arizona or Florida when you're really old for a little while. That's the other part of that. And I didn't want that life. I wanted something more. And I just had this nagging feeling. There had to be more than this. Jesus said, "I am the bread of life." And what he meant by that is that this nagging feeling that we all experience from time to time, he's the one that satisfies that. This hunger, this spiritual hunger that we feel, it's something that's deep, and when we're so busy in life, it can be easy to miss that we actually are feeling that. But Jesus comes along and he says, "I'm the bread of life." He's the one that can fill your soul, so he claims. There's this woman from Japan, and she said this really interesting thing. I want to show you what it is. In Japan, they need to eat rice, she said. It's like we've got two stomachs. We've got one stomach for ordinary food and one stomach for rice. And however much food, meat, potatoes, fruit, vegetables that we eat, we don't feel full. We don't feel satisfied until we eat rice. And I think if Jesus was speaking with her, he wouldn't have said, "I'm the bread of life." He would have said, "I'm the rice of life. I'm the one that can fill up that other part of you that all of these other worldly things cannot." Okay, so I know this might be a little strange for a talk, but I want you to actually come with me. I want to take you somewhere, and I think that what I want to show you is going to help all of this make a little more sense. So let's go. Now, we all experience these longings or this hunger in lots of different ways. And some of us, if we're honest, might just say, well, I don't really even think that there is this deeper longing or this deeper hunger. And there's so many people that I've spoken with over the years that they've said that. And then what happened is they encountered God's love. They actually experienced it for themselves. And it was only then that they realized what they were actually missing. So I used to have this SUV, and I would drive that SUV for probably from the beginning of college until just a few years ago. Well, the thing is that it made all these weird noises and stuff like that, but I was just used to it. That was just the car that I drove, and I loved it. It was kind of a man's SUV, and there was just a lot of memories with it. So I was kind of tied to it and didn't let it go for a long time. Well, when we were getting ready to have our second child, it was time for something new. And so we went to the car dealer, and my wife and I were standing there, and of course I'm thinking, we're gonna replace the SUV with something manly, right? Something awesome, something that's gonna make me feel incredible. So we got one of these, right? The minivan. And here's the thing. For years, I was utterly opposed to having a minivan in my life. I thought that if I had a minivan in my life, that would mean that my life was boring. It would mean that I had lost any edge of coolness that I had ever dreamed of having. And that really I was just, I don't know, a dad. And I probably had a dad bod, or I don't know, like my life had probably really sunk to a low level if I was driving a minivan. And then I got in the minivan and I drove it. And you know what happened? It was amazing because not only was it like new, so it didn't make those weird noises when I hit the brakes that I just really didn't pay attention to before. It's not like I was having to go in and fix it or anything like that. It was just new. It was working. It had a smooth ride. And as a dad, it actually fit all of the needs that I had. In fact, I even talk about manly. I finished my whole basement. Not once did I rent a trailer. I used this baby right here. Because sometimes people just don't know what they're missing until they experience it. Okay, so maybe you are not into minivans and you're like, Nick, that's great that you love your minivan. I just don't think I'm a minivan kind of guy. And people say that about Jesus and Christianity all the time. They say, well, it's really nice, that's very good for you, but it's just not for me. But when you think about it, that's actually not a very logical thing to say. Because if Christianity is actually true, then it is important for you, and it is good for you. But if it's not true, it's actually not good for me. And so we have to find out, well, is it true? Is it important? Is it relevant? Well, here's what C.S. Lewis once said. He's the guy that wrote The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. He's pretty famous for that, but he used to be this famous atheist professor at Oxford. And he was friends with J.R.R. Tolkien, who wrote The Lord of the Rings. Maybe you've read the books or seen those movies. And they became friends and started asking these big questions, similar to the ones we're asking in Alpha. And he actually, eventually, after considering the evidence, became a Christian. And he said this. He said, Christianity, if false, is of no importance. And if true, it's of infinite importance. The only thing that it cannot be is moderately important. A lot of people think that science and faith are opposed to each other, but they're actually really good friends for so many different reasons. When you look throughout history, there's so many famous scientists that you'll read about in your textbooks that follow Jesus, that were Christians who professed this belief in the scientific method, but also professed this belief that this man who claimed that he was more than a man actually was. There's Newton and Kepler and Galileo and Copernicus, that they all thought that there was something more to life than this. And it's not just the ancient guys or C.S. Lewis from a generation ago. It's actually, there's a lot of people today, even some of the most noted scientists of our time. Francis Collins, who helped to map out the Human Genome Project, one of the most revolutionary and, frankly, one of the most challenging scientific endeavors that we've attempted as a race in recent history, is a believer. All right, we're here. I'll be right back, but you check out what Francis has to say.
Well, in the home where I grew up, faith was not something that was talked about very much. My father was a professor of drama, my mother a playwright. When I went to college and those discussions in the dorm late at night about religion began to occur, I had no particular reason to attach value to a faith system. It had never been something I was familiar with or had internalized at all. I ended up in the medical school curriculum sitting at the bedside of patients with diseases. And one afternoon, one of my patients, a wonderful elderly woman, much like a grandmother, who had very bad heart disease. She had a particularly bad episode of chest pain while I was with her. She got through it, and at the end of that, explained to me how her faith was the thing that helped her in that situation. And after she finished her own very personal description of that faith, she turned to me, and I had been silent, and she looked at me quizzically, and she said, "What do you believe, doctor?" And ultimately, I had to admit to myself that her question had made me realize that I had arrived at an answer to the most important issue that we humans ever deal with. Is there a God? And I had arrived there without ever really looking at the evidence. And I was supposed to be a scientist. If there's one thing scientists claim they do is to arrive at conclusions based upon evidence. And I hadn't taken the trouble to do that. I thought Christ was as much myth as history, and I realized after reading more about it, this was a historical figure upon which we have a great deal of evidence for his existence and his teachings, and even his rising from the dead in a literal way. I realized for the first time that one can come to belief on a rational basis, a journey that I thought would result in strengthening my atheism, but to my surprise, resulted in my conversion.
See, science and faith, they're actually friends. They just answer different questions. See, this is a cupcake, obviously, and it's a white chocolate raspberry cupcake. I'm very excited to eat it. So if you're a scientist, ooh, got some frosting on my fingers. But if you're a scientist, you could take this cupcake and you could put it under a microscope and you could find out exactly what it's made of. You could determine all of the different ingredients. You could maybe even figure out like where those ingredients came from on planet Earth, and that'd be pretty amazing. There's amazing things that science could do to understand this cupcake. But here's what science can't do. Science can't tell you who made this cupcake and who it's for. And is it to celebrate anything? To do that, you have to go to the person that baked it. I didn't ask him, but I'm pretty sure that it was baked for me. That's good. So what we're going to do in Alpha is we're going to explore those questions of who and why, because science is good and they're answering the questions of what and how. But we want to look at the questions that our souls are longing to answer. And so in the weeks ahead, we're going to start to do just that. See, a lot of people will wonder, well, what does a guy from 2,000 years ago know about filling that longing in our soul? Why is it that Jesus thinks that he's the bread of life? And the reason for that can be found in something that Jesus said really towards the end of his life. He said that I am the way and the truth and the life. No one can come to the Father except through me. See, Jesus said that he's the way. And when he said that, it's kind of like for me when I'm driving around town, unless I'm driving to go get a cupcake from Hope, obviously I know how to do that, but when I'm driving around town, I almost always have to have my GPS on. I am worthless when it comes to directions. I do not know, just from standing wherever I am, what way is north, south, east, and west. I need something to help me with that. And Jesus says that when it comes to living our life well, and not only just living our life well, but actually finding a way to have eternal relationship with God and connect with our Creator, Jesus says, I am the way. Not only that, he says, I'm the truth. See, there's a lot of things that are going on in our world where people will say, well, this is what's true, or that's what's true, or what was true for you isn't true for me. And Jesus says, I'm the truth. See, there's lots of people that I follow on social media, but I don't really truly know them, right? I might follow them and I might be able to look at their account and explain some things about their life, but I don't know what it's like to be in relationship with them. And Jesus, when he says that he is the truth, he's saying that he is the one that can show a lost world, a world that is confused, can show them the right way to go, but also a way to understand and bring light into this dark world. But he also says that he's the life. And what that really means is that all of those things that steal life from us, or the things that we put into our happiness bucket that we were hoping would fill us with life, or really when it comes to thinking about, is there anything after this life? He says, I'm it. He says that all of the guilt that we carry, sometimes the guilt that we don't need to carry, but we just do because we're embarrassed or we're ashamed about something about us, or maybe we misunderstood a situation in our lives and we just felt guilty. Jesus sets us free from that. He gives us new life from that. But there's also the things that we just wish weren't true about us. All the things that we regret, the things that steal life from us and steal life from the people that we love. Well, Jesus says, I have new life for the person that wants to be free from that. Because he says, I'm the way and the truth and the life, and no one comes to the Father except through me. So Jesus said that he came that we would have a full and abundant life. And so what we're going to try to do together is see if we can find out exactly what he's talking about. So if you live to be 70 years old, this is how you can expect to spend the rest of your life. You're going to spend about 20 years and 3 months asleep, 10 years and 5 months watching TV. You're going to spend 7 years and 6 months just eating and drinking, 5 years and 9 months in some sort of transportation, 18 months waiting in lines, and get this, 6 months waiting at red lights. Now, it's pretty crazy to think about that most of us will spend more time in our lives waiting at a red light than asking these big, important questions. So I want to invite you to continue this journey with us. Come back next week and let's continue to ask these questions, because there really is more to life than this.